Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward.
Welcome, my friends, to Paranormal Heart Podcast, a safe place to talk about your paranormal encounters. I'm your host, Kat Ward. Well, it's been a rough couple of months here, and I have to apologize to you listeners for not having any episodes in June. Life just got in the way, and I was unable to get anything done for the show, but I'm back with new episodes for you all to enjoy. I recently learned that a dear friend of mine's mom listens to the show, so I want to say hello, Sarah. Thank you so much for listening to the show, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support. Much love to you. In episode 121, my special guest is fellow podcaster and world traveler Michael Newkopf. Michael had his first paranormal experience at the young age of 2 years old when he fell down a shaft. He later learned that an unknown being pushed him down that shaft and another pulled him out. He also grew up seeing shadow beings and UFOs, and has had many experiences while traveling to places like France and Egypt. Michael is a Reiki Master, Astral Traveler, and has had a near-death experience, also known as NDE. Michael is currently working on improving on his psychic abilities and has a few podcasts such as The Energy That Surrounds Us, Riding Through the Unknown, and a few more. If you have any stories related to paranormal experiences like ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, extraterrestrials, local legends, or your psychic gifts, I would love to hear from you. You can be a guest on the show and share your story, or you can send me your real story for me to narrate on the show. You can reach out to me at paranormalheart13@gmail.com, and if you want to remain anonymous, I will make sure not to mention your real name. New episodes of the show are released on the second and last Sunday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find the show on YouTube, Podbean, and all major podcast platforms. If you wish to support the show, please share it with others, like each episode, and don't forget to leave a review. It will help us reach more people and make them realize that they are not alone in these paranormal experiences. Additionally, you can now find Paranormal Heart Podcast merchandise on TeePublic. You can buy mugs, t-shirts, hats, and more. So please share the link to TeePublic with others. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, Michael. Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Well, I am honored to be on your show.
Could you tell us how the paranormal first started out for you?
So for me, that's actually an interesting story because growing up metaphysical, I'd always see shadows around in the corner of my eyes, so I thought nothing of it. And had an experience at 2 years old where I fell down a shaft, and so I had my winter gear on. Come to find out now, talking with some mediums and everything, that I was pulled into the shaft that I fell down.
Oh, wow.
By accident, they say accident.
Yeah.
Using air quotes for everyone listening. I always thought I had memory of talking with one of the beings and saying, hey, if I'm going to help, I need to come back with my gifts and everything ready and be able to access them. Which, now that I think about it, what 2-year-old thinks about that?
I was thinking that, yeah.
That's what I did, and finding out that there was actually two beings, the one that pulled me in and the one that pulled me away from them. So fast forward to my 20s, and I get asked by a friend on Facebook if I want to do paranormal investigations. And I was like, you mean this is real? People actually do this? And I was like, because I've seen the shows on TV and thought that was great TV, but and they were like, yeah. So I went on my first investigation and was hooked, and then started to find out that all those little experiences that I had growing up that I thought were just metaphysical, spiritual experiences were actually also classified as paranormal.
That's amazing. Were you hurt when you fell?
No, actually, I had no broken bones, no bruised anything. I was like, I always say it felt like I was just set down.
Wow.
And the only thing that happened, and I'll describe this as I'm telling it for people listening, is there was a wire that was in the vent, and the mark I got was one of my eyebrows got nicked, and no hair to this day grows in that spot.
Wow.
So it's like I have a constant visual memory.
That's scary. So do you know what kind of entities they were? Like, was it one negative that pushed you in and a positive entity that pulled you out?
You know, I'm still uncovering bits and pieces, and so I would say I didn't feel any danger that I can recall from either one, but needless to say, pulling me into a vent from the second floor down to a first floor to a basement, I was like, would I say is friendly? I don't know. But, was it really accidental? It could be, or it could be that it was. I know this is going to sound strange to people, but this is how my mind works is, was I pulled in to activate this conversation to activate everything?
I was
So
thinking
it
that
was
too. Yep.
meant to happen. In which case, both entities are good. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sometimes we see things as catastrophic, but then you realize it's a blessing in disguise. So yeah, that was a traumatic thing having to fall like that. But like you said, maybe it was done for a reason to actually activate your gifts.
I think so, because you would think having that experience I would be weary of heights, but I'm really not.
Oh wow, that's good. Yeah, because even though it happened at such a young age, you would still have that subconscious fear of heights, but you don't have that.
Yeah, I'll be like, if I'm on the top of a building, I will go to the edge and look down, and
Oh,
I'm like, part of me will be like, okay, this is, the safe zone. And then another part of me is like, we don't need to go any further. We're good here.
yeah. Oh, you're braver than I am. I'm not a fan of heights.
I will say, I don't know if it comes from this or future events, but I kind of, in a way, I guess could be tied to this event is I have no fear of death. It's like somebody says, well, that could kill you. I'm like, okay. And
Yeah.
so could a lot of things. Why am I going to let that one stop me?
For me, I always say I'm not afraid of death. It's just how I would die. So that kind of freaks me out. I try to not think of those things, but
Yeah, I do have lots of ways I'd want to go versus ways I wouldn't want to go, but in the end, they're all going, so
yeah,
why worry about it?
true. So had you had any other paranormal experiences? You mentioned that you would see shadows on the corner of your eyes?
I did. I would, and I always thought they were just playful spirits because I would see them, and then when I would turn and look at them, they would disappear. And so I thought it was just a fun game. I never thought about shadow beings and all of this that I think of now, being like, wow, I was around this as a kid all the time. probably better I didn't know what I was around
Yeah.
versus knowing.
Sometimes being oblivious is a gift.
Yeah. And I did have one really interesting near-death experience. So to set the stage is I'm really warm-natured. Like I pretty much feel like an oven all the time. I'm constantly warm, and I rarely get sick. It's like if I get a cold, it's like for 6 hours, and then I'm done,
Oh, wow.
run its course. So with that in mind, what I'm about to share explains why I call it what I do is so I was at home and I was sitting on the sofa and all of a suddenly I started feeling like there was ice growing on my bones. And I was like freezing and I was like, this is summer. And anybody living in Texas knows in the summertime, cold is the last thing you'll ever feel. But sure enough, I was like, so I was like, well, I'll put a blanket on, and I'm on my couch watching TV, and I'm like, not warming up. In fact, I'm getting even colder, and I'm like, well, let me put another heavier blanket on. So I got two blankets on, and I'm like, not getting any warmer, and I start to feel a little off in my head, and so I called my mom and I was like, I don't think I'll be coming to work tomorrow because I'm just, for some reason, I'm starting to feel really cold. I'm feeling off. And she was like, just go lay down, get some sleep. We'll see in the morning how you're doing. Well, I get on the hardwood floor in the living room and I start walking and I get to the hallway where it transfers to carpet for the rest of that side of the house, which is a blessing. And that'll come to fruition in a second.
Okay.
Is I walk into my bedroom, and in the center of the room, against the wall, under the window, is a pure four-post wood bed frame. So I get to the corner closest to the door, and all of a sudden, everything goes black. And I have no memory of what happened to cause me going blank, but when I'm out, I feel like something is happening. Like I'm talking with something, or something about me is changing and opening up, and I come to, and I'm on the floor, and my chin hurts really bad, which is unusual for me because I have a high pain tolerance. And I feel my chin, and there's this really sore spot. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And I start to notice I'm feeling warm again. It's like my body's warming up. So whatever was making me cold had run its course. Well, I don't even think to look at the clock. I get up and I'm like, okay, let me get into the bathroom, see why my chin's hurting, what's going on. And I find out I must have hit it on the post when I collapsed and fainted, because I had a bruise on it where it looked like the skin tore a little bit.
Ouch.
And for any of your listeners who are familiar with the science of when a body regenerates itself from catatonic state, this part will make sense. All of a sudden, everything inside me comes spewing out.
Oh.
And I'm like, took a while to clean it all up. And I was like, and I felt totally normal then as soon as that happened. And I was like, that only happens when you're dead. and the body is ejecting the dead material out, is what my understanding was. And so that's why I call it a near death experience, because I never went to the hospital.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I could start to feel like my thoughts were altered. Like I was starting to piece together things in a different way. And I was like, wait, how do I know this now all of a sudden? How am I able to understand this? And one great example is, so anyone that knows me knows I'm into history. Math is my worst subject, science right behind it. Well, I walk up to this lady while I was at University of North Texas on my way to a philosophy class, and she has this look of confusion on her face. And I was like, what's going on? She goes, well, I'm in meteorology and I don't understand this. And I said, well, what don't you understand? And she shows me her book. And I go, well, this goes to this, and this is what explains this and this. And she goes, oh my God, you're right. And so I would start to help her with her meteorology.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, so are you in meteorology? I was like, no, I've never studied it in my life. But somehow my brain was able to piece together pieces of it to make it understandable. And I was like, I don't know where that came from. And I don't know, she said she was doing better in class. So I don't know if it was from me or, her studying better. But I was like, yeah, that's an example of when I say my mind started working in ways is like never studying meteorology. I don't know how I even could begin to talk to her about it. So that piqued my interest.
That's amazing. How old were you?
I was in my 20s, early 20s.
Wow. Any theories as to why you felt that way before everything happened? Why you had all that cold?
I think what it was is, so back when I was 2, when I said I want the stuff to activate when it's time,
Mhm.
I feel like they were doing a shutdown to do a reboot to install like the new update.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, after this happened like 2 more times, not as severely, I was like, I looked in and I said, look, there's got to be an easier way to update
Yeah.
than this making me crash and coming back to. And they're like, so far so good. I don't recall having any since.
Wow, that's amazing. Did it, how did you feel? Like, were you afraid, or is it just kind of like that happened?
So the strange thing about it is, for me in my circumstances, was it's like I had no warning they were coming.
Mhm.
And so they just happened. And then it was like, afterwards, my thinking was just like, okay, so that happened. And I just filed it away and didn't even think about it until I started podcasting. And then it's like my mind goes, yeah, you had 3 of these, as I'm talking to people about theirs. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I did. It's like I had forgotten about it, really.
Yeah. Did you tell your mom or anybody what had happened?
I talked a little bit about it, but I kind of tend to keep some of it to myself until I can really explain it. And so that's why I kind of enjoy doing the shows. Is every once in a while I'll drop what I like to call experiential bomb, where I'm like, hell yeah, I had this experience, and this is what I've learned from it. And then the guest will share their thoughts about it and explain more. And so I'm like, hey, cool, now I have more information about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I love there's so many paranormal podcasts out there now, but they're all amazing because it makes people realize, first of all, that they're not the only ones going through things like that. And sometimes we might have had experiences that we forgot, and someone will talk about it, and it's like, oh, yeah, I forgot that happened to me too.
Right. And to be honest, when I first started podcasting, doing my own show, I had a vision for it, but it just wasn't coming. And I was just interviewing a lot of paranormal investigators and interviewing, people about a location that they had been to or I was at. And so I was like, yeah, it's pretty much like any other. And I was like, well, let's not rock the boat too much. It's like I want to, but no. I had a co host at the time, and she's like, let's get established first. Then we can play
Mm-hmm.
around with it. I'm like, all right, you got a point. No sense pushing the envelope right out the chute, and then it's like, got to keep that level. So something to build up to.
Mm-hmm.
And we, the first show we did was put together in a hurry so we could get on a network before Facebook changed things up and it would be harder to get on. And so we were like, all right. So it was exploring our secret past. And so my intention behind it was to not only hear about, why people are doing this, but what's behind it. Like what, secrets, that they found while investigating that they can share, or what experiences they had that they don't really share. My intention was to give space for them to share it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we found out the title just didn't work because everybody kept saying, so what's the secret of our past? What's the secret? And I was like, all right. So my co-host and I were December of 2022 saying we gotta revamp. We can do better. Now we have 6 months under our belt because it was the end of July we started. And we said, first thing we got to do is we got to rename the show. It's just confusing everyone. And I was like, I get it. You're right. And so I think I had said to her, or she said to me, and Carla Norris was my co-host at the time. And we were throwing around titles, and I think I said it or she said it, but it was the energy around us. And then we were like, that's a really good title. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, somehow, I don't know where it happened, but it went from the energy around us to the energy that surrounds us. And I was like, okay, it's a longer title, but it's still really cool. And everybody liked it. I mean, we were getting compliments on the title. People liked the intro that Carla did because I'm not techie. So
Neither am I.
So I do enough to get the show up. I'm like, I don't do promos. I'm not good at any of that. And so I played to my strengths and said, I can host and we can make this work. And so come June, Carla had said that to me earlier that she wanted to go and do a show with some teammates. And so I was like, go for it. And so in June, we parted ways and she went to do her show. I did mine. And I was like, well, now I need to come up with an intro. So I happen, and I love how the universe works, is I have a cousin who sells some products online, and her son did a promo ad. And I was like, that ad was like 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, but it was like, I looked at it and I was like, that was actually really cool. So I approached him and I said, hey, I know we haven't met, but I know your mom. We're cousins. And he's like, oh, I know, I know. My mom told me about you. So I was like, cool. I was like, so if I was to give you an idea of something, could you make an intro and an outro for me? And I said, yeah. Well, in the process of setting up that show, I was toying around in my mind another show of just being stuff that I like to research and share. That's not really paranormal, but I was like, hey, it's an outlet. So I started thinking about it. And in to back up a second, too, in January 2023, when I'm launching the energy that surrounds us, a friend that I saw doing a co-hosting a show with a friend of mine on the network was wanting to do a show, and she couldn't find anyone to host, and she's in the UK. And I commented a few times on the episodes going, hey, I like how you asked that question, or I like, I can understand you, you're doing great. And so it came down to, because I can understand her, we talked about doing a show, and we were like, yeah, let's give it a whirl, and let's see what this will do. And we called it Paranormal Versus, and it was supposed to be UK versus the US. And so we were having a lot of fun and going along, and we'd miss a few shows because one of us may have been busy or not feeling well. So we were like, we're both on it. So if we can't both be on, we're just going to postpone it, reschedule. So we were like, no big deal. We were keeping it kind of informal and fun natured. Well, so in June of 23, my dad ended up passing away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And one of the things that he really enjoyed was watching the shows and hearing about the guests that I'd have on and topics. And he was really supportive of me going into what I call the esoterics, which I learned when I started the show, being hidden truths or hidden knowledge from everyone. And I started seeing a lot of things, about disclosure and stuff. And I was like, this information needs to be out there. So a fire was lit under me because he was, so supportive of me that I said, all right, for you, Dad, I'm going to do 10 episodes, 2 a month, starting in August. And I'll call this Writing into the Unknown. And I'll see if this series works. I'm not going to call it a show. I'll just call it a series because I'm not sure, what's going to come of it. So I'm reaching out to people in the community, and I'm like, don't really know who to talk to, who to have on. And so I end up getting to the time to launch the show, and I have my intro and outro for my cousin. So I got everything ready, and I took and modified my promo for the energy that surrounds us to be that show series. So I was like, okay, so I got the tech side done. Time to launch the show, and I'm like, I got 3 guests. The first guest goes over swimmingly. Great, guest. Everything worked out. The second guest was a risk that turned out to be a blessing, and through the first 2 guests, I all of a sudden had my entire series filled. because they were like, "Oh, you had so and so on. I'll come on your show. I want to
Nice.
share my story. You did so well with that episode." And a friend of mine came on as well and did an episode, and it was interesting because as the show developed, so did my story of not only was I realizing the esoteric knowledge that's out there to share, but also I had an esoteric story within myself that I was like, I had no idea about until started talking to these guests and started realizing, wait a minute, I can relate to a lot of this, and finding out I have involvement in this stuff. And so unlocking memories is slow but coming. And so, yeah, so now, long story short, I actually now have 3 shows.
Wow. Busy.
I know. It's amazing how you look at people doing shows and you think, oh, well, that's a quick hour. I'm sure that's, no time to put that on. And it's like, oh, there's about a week
Yep.
or two worth of time per hour.
Yeah. There's a lot of work. So when did you start podcasting? What year?
July of 22.
Okay. Nice. And look at you, have 3 shows now.
I know. And it's so strange. And I was laughing with the shows because being the host, we take certain liberties. And at the end of the year, we all sit down and we're like, okay, are we going to call this season 1, or are we just going to keep going? What's going to be different? What can we do differently now? And so I was like, all right, season 1's done. So season 2, I was like, yeah, let's generate a new look. And in that is my cousin generated thumbnails for my series.
Nice.
New intro and outros for both shows. And actually the thumbnail for my show as well. So he does all the artsy, techie stuff for me. And Kel and I were talking about our show and going, everybody loves the show, and your fiance, which they're about to get married in July, is on the show a lot. Why don't we just make him a co-host, and that way if one of us can't make it, we can still have the show. And he does the music for the show, so we're like, he's already a part of the show, really. So why not make it official? And he was like, yeah, I'd be happy to come on as a host. So now there's 3 of us hosting Paranormal Versus, and we do 3 episodes a month now for that show. And my series, Writing Through the Unknown, I do 3 a month because I realize, like we were saying, so much time goes into this that if I was to do a show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night or afternoon, I'd have no time to do anything else.
Yep.
So I was like, I didn't feel like 2 a month was enough to really get the information out and, to retain the audience. So I was like, well, what's a happy medium? So I said, let's just do the first 3 of every month. And that way, if for unforeseen reason we can't do an episode, we have a day, a week or 2, depending on how the month lands, where we can make up an episode if we so decide to. And if not, that's fine too. But yeah, it's amazing how much goes into podcasting because we learn marketing, producing, all these like skills.
Editing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, actually, I don't do editing. I will be completely honest and say my shows land the way they land. The only time I ever do any editing is if it's a pre-record and doing Zoom, because at first I didn't know how to use Zoom. So I would take the episode and then I would put the intro and outro on it and then air it. So that was the amount of editing I learned. And I like it that way because I think those little quirks and those little like oops moments helps people remember we're normal people too.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes I keep my my mistakes in, especially if it kind of pertains to the topic, and if it just smooth, I'll keep that in, and I'm really really bad for saying all the time, so I edit myself.
Yeah, I've been accused of, there's a couple words that people will pull me aside and go, you realize you say this like almost every episode at least this many times? And I'm like, really? Because I don't go back and watch. I am really bad about going back and watching to see, what's going on with the episodes. Because I'm like, once it airs, I'm like, it's done. And I upload it if I need to. It's different platforms. But I'm like, once it's done to me, it's done. I don't want to go back because I'm the type of personality of, if I go back, I'm going to start critiquing me on this part, this part, this part.
Yep.
And then I'm going to spend so much time focused on that on the next one that everyone's going to be like, why were you off? And I was like, yeah, I got in my head.
Yeah. And it's so easy to do.
Yeah. It is. And one of the things that amazes a lot of people is, so I have theater background ever since elementary school through my freshman year in college. And so I'm able to adapt and move my mind quickly to cover any gaps or like blank moments, which helps in podcasting. And I only bring this up because I don't do questions or really research a lot of the guests. Like, I'll watch enough to say, yes, I want this person as a guest because this needs to be shared. Or I'll see it on another show that I happen to be a part of, and I'm like, I got to get that guest on my show to share this. But my only question I ever come up with for my shows is, can you tell the audience who's not familiar with you a little bit about yourself? And then from that answer comes an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hour show. And everyone's like, how do you do that? I'm like, because I'm so focused on them being the guest that I'll hear something and it'll trigger in my mind and going, wait a minute, did they just say this?
Yep.
What is that? Or that sounds cool. Let's talk more about that. And I'll pick up on it. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, we can go deeper on that. And I had a few guests after they were on my show and on the series who were like, I really liked your style of interview because it didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation. And you were asking questions that most people miss. So we got to go deeper. So thank you for that. I was like, you're welcome. And so a lot of people started saying, well, what's your style? And I was like, well, I'd always say, it's an interview. It's, what do you mean it's style? So now I say it's conversational interviewing. And I'm like, they're amazed that I don't need a question to come up with. And the flip side of that as well is if I had a list of questions, I'd be so focused on getting those questions asked and answered
Yep.
that I would miss part of whatever was said in the interview. And so, yeah, I call those missed opportunities. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes those lead to a stray perspective of going off topic, but it's information that's really cool. That's not really shared. And I'm like, yeah, that's really cool that comes up on the show. And I've even had a guest or two say, well, because you asked this question, I've never been asked this before, so this will be an exclusive answer for you, for your show. And they'll
Nice.
answer the question.
Yep. When I first started my show, I used to have a list of questions, but a lot of times I didn't get the opportunity to ask because the conversation just didn't go there. So now I just have a couple of ideas in my head and I just let it go as a conversation.
Yeah. And, and there are people that make that work, and I, totally am for that. Don't feel like, there's more than one way to do a podcast show. And I was laughing with a friend of mine who I met through one of our networks that I'm on, and he has a show, and we actually met being interviewed on the same show. We were like on a panel, just his show and mine, and we hit it off really well. And we were like, hey, let's talk about being on each other's shows. How can we make this work? Our schedules are so conflicting. Well, I ended up being on his show, and before the show, he goes, I'm so nervous. And I said, why are you nervous?
Really?
And he goes, well, you're a really up there interviewer, and your shows are on another level. And I was like, I'm just a person. Just calm down, take a deep breath. It'll all be okay. And he goes, and I have your short bio.
Okay, so I'm recording again. I don't know what happened there. This will be out on the show. I'm not going to edit this part out, but that was really strange how my recording system just stopped. It's never done that before. It's so strange.
I know. It was such a good part of the story.
I know. And I got, like I told you before I hit record again, the last thing that you said was you were talking about this guy, and he says, and I got your bio. And then that was it. It stopped.
Yeah, so he holds it up, and nearly every word is highlighted. And I go, oh, you made it really colorful. And he goes, oh, no, these are all the things that I feel like we need to talk about. And I was like, oh, we need probably 3 or 4 shows if we're going to cover all of that. And he laughed, and he's like, oh, we might. And so we did one, and we covered maybe 2 or 3 topics. And then he was talking to me about live, and I said, yeah, it's really easy to do. It's just a little bit different feel because, there's no editing. It's what is. And he goes, well, I said, why don't you try it and see if you like it. If you do, go for it. If you don't, no harm, no foul.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up being his first live show.
Oh, that's awesome.
And one of the things that was I did that was a funny homage to me was when I launched my series, my first guest held up his finger as the one and goes, first episode. And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah, this is a great start to, hopefully we'll make it. And so when he did his live, I held up my finger and I was like, first live. So, yeah, and I think that's the key for a lot of people when they think about, what makes the podcast shows, successful. You gotta have fun with them. If you make it all strict and straight-laced, people watch it and think, well, this is just the news, and get bored and flick it off or turn it off. I don't know why I said flick it off.
Flick.
But yeah, it's like, bad shit.
Yeah.
Flick off. But yeah, I like to have fun. And so I try to bring a little bit of humor and fun to all the shows. And on one of the episodes of Paranormal Versus, there was a moment during the show where Matt, Kel's fiance, would have these little images popping up on his screen, and we're like, what are you doing? Because we can't mimic. And we found out he's on iPhone or Apple products. We're on the Droid products. And Apple, when you do a thumbs up, creates a bubbles that puts a thumbs up on the screen.
I didn't know that.
And I think if you do another symbol, balloons start going. And
That's
so we
funny.
all throughout an episode with our guest was like playing with all the different Apple and Kel and I are just sitting there like, we can't do a thing because we don't have an Apple.
Wow. I had an episode once, John Mallard from Odd Newfoundland, and he's such a hoot. I've known him for many years, and we laughed so much. It was one of my earlier shows. We just laughed during the whole thing. And I had one comment say, the paranormal is nothing to be laughed at, or something to that effect. You know, I'm not going to be listening anymore. You laugh too much. And it's like, no, the paranormal can be fun. Like, it's like, thank you for commenting and thank you for listening, but I'm going to keep going the way that I want to go.
I will say this to that comment that they made. Paranormal absolutely is based in fun. Point in case is when I started paranormal investigating, I was getting nothing. It was flat because I was treating it like a corporate job. Like, this is my job. This is going to be my job. So I'm going to do it serious. I'm going to do it, to the best of my ability. And I would be getting hardly anything in pictures. Wasn't getting any apparitions, no EVPs, nothing. And I watched Tennessee Wraith Hunters doing their Haunted Live, and they hazed one of their new members by hiding in the bathroom.
Oh, no.
And when he pulled the curtain, scared the crap out of them. They started laughing, and I looked and I said, you know what? If the Tennessee Wraith Chasers who are on TV can have fun with this, so can I.
Yeah.
And I started being more relaxed and having more fun with it. And my EVPs went up. My equipment started going off more. I was getting more stuff in pictures. And I actually even started seeing apparitions. So
nice.
I would say to the guest, you are partly correct, is, the paranormal is not a joking matter. It
can be very serious.
Field.
Yeah.
However, the spirits love having fun just as much as we do, so you gotta have fun with it. You'll go absolutely off the rails if you don't.
Yep. I have to tell you about one investigation that we did several years ago. So there was myself and one of my teammates in the basement. Everybody else was upstairs. And I was a little gassy that night. I don't know what I had for dinner, but I was a little gassy. So I walked into one of the rooms and, there was a little wind coming from me. And I looked at Chris and I said, oh, excuse me. Nothing else was said. So we finish investigating that room. We get into the hall. Chris looks at me and says, I can't believe you farted at me. And I had an ovulus in my hand, and all it said was awkward. Oh my God. We were laughing so hard. Chris sounded like he was a little girl laughing. I was crying. Katie comes running downstairs going, what's going on? We're watching you on the monitors and just like, why are you laughing? And I just gave her my equipment. I said, I have to go upstairs and compose myself. It's like, I'll be right back. And it took us some while to tell everybody else what had happened. But, Oh my Lord. It's just, it's just, we got that word just at the right time from the ovulus. So that was an amazing
Right.
reaction. But yeah, it just goes to show that investigations can be really funny sometimes.
Well, and what's kind of funny about that too is, I mean, if you hadn't said anything, he could have came back and been like, "Hey, our audio equipment picked up this sound. What spirit, did
Yeah.
that? What made that sound?" And you'd have to sit there and be like, "That's not a spirit. I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
You have to take, and everyone's so excited about the evidence.
Yeah.
And the other one that's gets to me that I find hilarious is when the stomach gurgles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you hear it and in normal tone, you're like, yeah, that's nothing. But then you hear it on audio playback and it sounds like something's growling. And
Yeah.
like,
and that's why I had. Oh, hang on. We're having technical issues here. Stand by. Okay, folks, we had some more technical difficulties. All of a sudden, Michael, you just froze on the screen.
Actually, on my end, it was you froze. I finished the story and then all of a sudden it looked like you were going to say something, but nothing. And I was like, on my side going, oh, well, I guess we froze. So if anyone's like still able to hear, I'm like, yeah, I think we're frozen.
Yeah, I said something too. It's like, oh no, you froze. Oh, good grief. I'm going to keep this in because it's kind of like a comedic shtick or something. Oh, I can't believe this. This is so funny. Whatever's messing with us must be a comedian.
Yeah, I think so because I have on my shows numerous times guests will be like talking at this level. Suddenly they're talking at this level, and then it'll come back up to this level.
Oh, wow.
Like,
so the audio is being messed up with.
yeah.
That's funny.
Or they'll like freeze like I did.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're still talking. And I'm like, I don't know. Like sometimes, given like a few seconds past, if it doesn't look like they're coming back, because I'm on the radio too. So I'm like, oh, our guest seems to have, being interfered with or, they froze. So we'll see if, they're coming back, and we'll continue. And then they'll pop back in as if nothing's happened, unaware that they froze out. And I'm like, yeah, or they'll be in mid-sentence and then they'll just disappear and pop right back in. And I don't even let them back in. They just pop back
Oh,
in.
wow.
And I'm like, these are just weird. And I'm like, I'm so glad this is live and everyone is watching this because I don't know if I could explain all the stuff that happens sometimes on shows.
I do get technical difficulties sometimes, but there was one, we were at the tail end of the interview and I lost power. The whole town went out. So I had to message him on my cell saying, I'm so sorry. But I put a little comedic thing in the end saying, we're talking about Spearfinger and that location. Oh, what's it called? Is it Smoky Mountains? Anyways, so I just said something about he was abducted or something. I went with it. I worked with it. And yeah, just...
Yeah. Hopefully ones at it are like, she's kidding, right?
Yeah. Oh, Lord. You got to love technology sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even remember what you were saying this time.
I think we were just talking about shows and yeah, I've kind of blinked out.
Uh-oh. I lost you again. Oh, no.
Too.
Oh, there you go. I lost you for a second. Yeah. Stop it. Okay. So what other abilities do you have? Do you have any others?
So I can call it through volunteer work I've kind of developed, and one of my old house managers that I worked with where I volunteer at being an usher. So this location where I scan tickets, whenever we would get the house manager at the time and I were notorious that we would both like all of a sudden like, get really tall and like feeling like
Okay, this has to stop. Whatever's monkeying with the equipment, we see you, we hear you, we don't see you, but we know you're there. Could you please stop? Geez. So
uh,
you and the other person would stand tall.
and we would this is gonna be such a long story for a short story because of all the glitches. It's hilarious. But we would just get the sense something was wrong and we would be able to get right there. We started calling it our spidey sense.
That's what I call
And
mine
so
too. Yeah.
in investigating, I'll be like, if I'm in a room and I'll suddenly I'll turn and look somewhere and I'm like, everyone's like, what's going on? I'm like, there's something over there.
Oh, no, not again. Oh, geez. I am so sorry, folks. This is interesting.
I don't know what it is.
You did it again. And then your background got really dark. The lighting changed. You're still nice and bright, but your background got all of a sudden really dark. And then I lost you. It's still dark, but
Okay, guys.
okay.
Can we get through this, please? No, just kidding.
Okay, take my selenite out. Come on.
Be like, give us like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then feel free to glitch again. See if you can give us 10 minutes.
We're both crazy. We're talking to the air. No.
No, but in investigating, that's like I'll get a sense and I'll look and I can't explain why I'm looking over there, but it's like I'm like there's something over there. Or if I hear something, I'll automatically turn and look, or my eyes will look if I can. And I'm not one of those people that goes right away and says, "Did you hear that?" Like they do in TV.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that cries wolf, and
Yeah.
it's like, a dog outside, and I'm like, "Oh my god, did you hear that?" And it's like, "Yeah, it was a dog." Whatever.
Or someone's gassy.
Or hungry.
Yeah, we're hungry. Oh.
But my all-time favorite moment that happened to me was on a ghost walk in Jefferson, Texas, which is a haunted city nearby. And my co-host at the time, we were still doing a show together. We went and we were going on this ghost walk. And there's like probably 10, 15 people going, and the lady starts out by saying, "How many people here are paranormal investigators?" And my co-host and I raise our hands. We're the only two that raises our hands. And she's like, "Okay, cool." So we go on the walk, and I decide to take a couple steps over, and I take like 3 or 4 shots of this courtyard in different areas. And this gentleman walks up to me and says, "Ooh, what'd you find? What's over there?" And so I pause for a moment, and I'll state, "This is what's going on in my brain. Oh, my camera is telling me there's a spirit there. There's an orb over there. There's a shadow over there." And then it's like, and then I'm like, I come back and I go, and this is what I really say in the moment. "I don't know, sir. I have to put it on my computer to see." I'm like, I call it my favorite moment because it's like, this is the problem with the paranormal TV shows now is they don't show the editing and everything that they do. So everybody has the illusion that you go in, something happens, you catch it, you see it, evidence verified, done. And it's like, doesn't work that way, people. And so I loved Ghost Hunters when they first started because they would be like, day one,
Yep.
we did this. Day two, this happened. Day three, this, was going on. Day four, nothing really happened. Day five, we did review. Day six, we presented. So it's like you had an idea that this was many
It's a
days
long
of footage
process. Yeah.
condensed to an hour. Now they don't do that anymore. And I'm like, yeah, you guys really ought to put that back in
Yeah.
because people are getting the wrong idea of thinking you walk in, something happens, and you walk out, and you're like, great.
Yeah, because sometimes there's nothing that really happens during an investigation. You could be there for hours and hours, and it's just footage that you're going over of nothing happening.
I like to tell people, even though you don't see anything in your, say, 3 or 4 hours, while you're there, wait till you do the replay evidence review because
Hmm.
then you might have been picking up stuff you didn't realize you were picking up. So it's never a total waste.
Yep.
But I will say, though, too, is I have some friends that are on paranormal ghost shows, and one of the things that they'll say is they go to a location, and if the first day or two nothing happens, they just pack up and leave
Hmm.
and go to another location that's more active in their definition. And so I was like, well, that's kind of a disservice to all the locations, but at the same time, yeah, I understand you can't spend a week's worth of budgeting for 15 minutes of evidence and then go, yeah, how are we going to stretch this out to make a
Yeah,
hour show?
because it is a business. It's entertainment.
Yeah.
But I have to give kudos to those shows. I've said before that I find because of these TV shows, the paranormal is a little bit more accepted now. So when I tell people that I'm into the paranormal, it's not like I have 3 heads anymore. Maybe 1.5.
Yeah. The other show I like to give kudos to is for one episode in particular, and that was Destination Fear.
Oh, really? What was the
Because
episode?
I forget what location they were at, but they walked in and they were in this abandoned building. And Dakota goes and says, if anybody's here, make a sound. And all of a sudden there was this bang, and they all went running out of the building. And then the next clip is they show them walking back in, and Dakota goes, I have to apologize, Spirit. We asked you to make a sound. You did. We ran out. We're sorry. We won't run out on you this time. Can you make a sound? And I was like, that episode to me gave me a whole lot of respect for them and
Yeah.
the team because most shows the people run out, they'll never go back in and apologize and say,
Yeah.
oh, this, was this. They're going to be like, yeah, that place is super haunted. Oh my God, we ran out. And I was like, so everybody will always ask me, on shows, so, how many times have you run out of a building? And I'm like, 0.
Yeah.
I have yet to run out. I'm not saying I won't run out at some point, but it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, we haven't run out of any buildings either, but we have screamed or jumped, and then we apologize. Like, sorry, we asked you to show us evidence that you're here, either show yourself or make a sound, and then we react because we got frightened, right? And then it was like, well, sorry, I know we asked for it. Please, we really apologize. Please understand that, we're excited. Thank you for the confirmation, but yeah, it does happen.
Yeah. And one of the things, too, so another gift to answer your question is I've always had the ability, like people will say, to hear like a wolf. Like I can hear if I really relaxed and focused, I could probably hear conversations going on in neighboring houses if I wanted to.
Mhm.
And how we found this out was I was getting a massage in a bookstore, and the room was, a little closet area. I know a lot of people are going, well, closets are very thin walls. Well, these weren't. These were like, I say closets, they were mini small classrooms,
Okay.
really, meeting areas. But it kind of had a feel of a closet because there was no windows. You closed the door, it was pitch black. Well, the massage lady, when she started working on me, would go, I could hear all the conversations going on in the store. And I said to her, yeah, I know. Do you mean you can't hear that when, I'm not here? And she was like, honestly, no.
Oh, wow.
And I thought nothing of it and everything. And I get home and my mom goes, um, the massage lady called because she's a friend of ours. And she's like, so you're hearing through the walls of the store? And I'm like, yeah. And it became this running joke because in the back of our house, everybody would be talking about doing something, and I'd be in the front, and I'd wake up and I'd walk in and be like, so, and I'd answer the question, and they're like, how did you know we asked that question? So it became a running joke that I could hear really well.
Yeah.
And so how this was funny is I turned it on some friends. So the team that I had started with, I'm not investigating with them anymore, but they gave me my break. And so on one of the investigations, they decided they were going to have fun and get me to run out of the building. So I was put in this room with glass around a chair, and there was this glass casing next to me that had like bookcases or shelves in it with glass sliding doors, and they closed the door, and I can hear, voices outside, talking, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, I gotta tune them out because if I'm listening to them, I'm not gonna hear what's going on over here. And I'm like, and with this being an abandoned high school, I start hearing what sounds like a lady stapling. You know how they
Yep.
have those forms, you slide it under, staple, slide it under, staple. And so I'm hearing that repetitive sound. I'm like, that's really cool. And then there's this tapping at the door, and I'm like, and I can kind of hear like little soft footprints. And so I'm like, yeah, that's my team. So I go back to focusing on the staple sound, and I'm like, is that, I'm like in my head thinking, is this a teacher here, administrator, student? Who is this?
Uh-oh.
Class.
Here we go.
Next.
Here we go again.
Hey, we're over 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So they gave us 10 minutes.
Can you give us a few more minutes, please? Okay.
But so where in the story was I?
It was, you were asking if it was a student, a teacher, or whoever making that sound with the stapler.
And so then I hear like somebody tapping their fingernails on the glass shelf. And I'm like sitting here thinking, okay, if this is my team, I'm seriously impressed because there's all this broken glass around me. How did they get next to me to tap the glass without stepping on the glass?
Mm-hmm.
And they swear nobody actually entered the room. But they all were laughing and going, we hate you. You didn't run. I was with my ex-girlfriend at the time. We were dating, and she's like, you guys, and I could hear hers, and she actually confirmed, she said it was, you guys are wasting your time. He's not going to run. This isn't going to work. And I was like, so that's what the mumbling was I heard, was them trying to try and get me to run out, scare me. And it was funny that it backfired, but at the same time, I go and I said to him, I said, yeah, I heard, someone stapling, but I'm more curious which one of you came in and was tapping on the glass. And they're like, no, we swear, nobody came in. I was like, somebody was tapping on the glass.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, whoa. And I was like, yeah. And so it was interesting for me to put together, and figuring out how to use my abilities and gifts to help me in investigating, and also to have some fun too, and just learn, and one of the things that people have to remember while on investigations is don't get so uptight with it and hyper focused on it, because like, especially when you're in a building of multi levels, like I was on a basement and came up to see what the team was doing. Well, your normal reaction is to walk up and be like, hey, what's going on? Well, when I did this, I'd always get yelled at, stop talking, we're doing EVPs. And I'm like, I would know that. I'm like, how would I know you guys are working on EVP work? So yeah, just just common little nugget of decency is, keep in mind, if you're separated and people wander in when they're done, they don't know what you're doing. So don't bite their heads off or get upset with them because they came back. Just kind of either pull them aside or nudge, come up with a signal way of saying, hey, don't talk.
Yeah.
Right now.
Now, when you're hearing these things, are you actually physically hearing them from your ears, or is it in your mind?
I would say I've, like, the stapling in the glass, I definitely heard with my ears. And there are times like I may hear like a voice and I'll say, oh, that's just my mind playing tricks on me. So I need to stop doing that of saying, oh, that's just my mind playing tricks on me. And
We second guess ourselves.
yeah, second guess myself out of it. And I've gotten better at doing that. And a fun story about that is, okay, guys, give me about 5 minutes to tell this story because this is really good and needs to be in one piece. Is I was on a road trip with a friend from Holland, and we were at a school that was abandoned in West Virginia, and we were walking around, and I'm in one of the classroom closets, and something is pushing on my shoulders, trying to get me through the floor. And I look and I go, spirits, I'm solid based. I'm not going through the floor. Stop trying to push me through. It's not going to work. And of course, they would stop. And so I walk out of the closet back into the classroom, and I get in the hallway. And my friend was wearing a hat, and he's like this, going like, what? And I go, what happened? He goes, something just flicked my hat off. I was like, well, that was cool. All I had was somebody trying to push me through the floor. I'm like, why couldn't I get a hat flip or something? And so I was like, man, I missed it. That sucks. And so we're in this hallway is about 4 classrooms. So I go to walk across the hall, and I'm like, okay. And I like to, when I first get to a place, go room by room and take base photographs.
Yep.
So later when I have a photo, if something's off, I can go back to an original pre-photo and say, yeah, that was definitely not there. Or, oh, that may be this, just the camera was a little out of focus. Being digital still happens. But I turn and I take one step, and we're all 3 of us are still in the hallway, and we hear this giggle, and then we hear my friend's name. And then there's another giggle, and we stop, and I turn back to face my friend, and he's standing there, and we look at each other, and I'm like, yeah, we're kind of telepathically communicating, going, yeah, I heard that. You heard it too. Okay, we're hearing the same thing, so we're not crazy. And so it goes off again. We go up the stairs, and I go out onto the balcony, and I'm in the center of the balcony looking down at a stage, and he won't come in the room. And I'm like, you coming? He's like, nope, I'm fine here. And I noticed there's like this strange mark on the floor. Not like symbology or anything like that. It's just the wood has this weird blemish on it. So I go to take photos of it to see, what's what. Later, none of the digital photos of it turn out.
Really?
They all fuzzy beyond recognition. And I'm like, this is really weird because I know this camera autofocuses and it doesn't do this. So that was weird. Well, we then go to the top level, and there's this room that overlooks kind of like a spotting tower or something really strange. It's three-sided windows, and there's all these flies in there. And we walk in, and the energy is super heavy. Like, okay, something happened here. Well, comes to find out, because this is the only spot in the whole school that had flies, and the energy being thick, is there's a report of a student jumped out of that window and took his life. And so we're like, definitely can confirm that. And we then go about doing our stuff, and my friend from Holland and I reconnect at my car out front, and we are through in a group called Ghost Ship Hunters. We met on Facebook. He goes like this on the hood of my car, the top of the car, puts his arms on there, puts his head on there, and he goes, "Thank you for not embarrassing me." And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "You didn't run." Because I always say in the group, whenever we're talking about a haunting, I was like, I will go in towards the haunting. I'm not going to run. I won't run. So this was like my trial by fire moment. And he goes, "Thank you for not running." And I was like, yes, it's like, and for me, I was like, yeah, this was like the second or third time I was like auditorily heard disembodied voices or sounds. So I was like kind of proud of myself too for not running.
Yeah.
But it kind of solidified our friendship too. We are who we say we are. We do what we say we're going to do. And so we're still really great friends and have had many adventures. And we still get together online and joke about a few things. And one of the jokes is, I'll share with you. I've never shared on another show, interview, or anything. Is so because I'm single, he likes to poke fun because he was a zombie on The Walking Dead as an extra.
Very cool.
And knows a lot of the people there. And we went there, but I didn't get to do makeup because we didn't get there in time, and they weren't shooting that day. So I was like, a couple of things, but we're like still. It was like a lot of fun being on the set and seeing everything. Well, he likes to every once in a while, he'll post a picture of a zombie girl, and he's like, "Hey, Michael, I found a girl for you. She's a little warm, but I think, this could work in your favor." And I'll always respond back, and I'll turn it on him sometimes, and I'll be like, "What, did she eat your cooking or something?" So we just have this great friendship and everything. But I really have to say, for me, the highlight of doing the investigations and the shows is more than getting the experience, is collaborating and meeting new people, making new friends, and getting new ideas and new information. That to me is the fun of it.
I agree. Because I remember when I first started really getting into the paranormal, there was lots of bullying and harassing in the community, and some people would mock other people and saying, "Well, your evidence is stupid. It doesn't mean anything. Mine is the best." And just everybody got tired of that. And I hate using the term, but the para-unity actually happened. So people just started raising up and saying, "No, I don't. I'm not going to accept this bullying." And more and more people support each other, and I really like that.
Yeah, I started using the word. It's funny you say para-unity. I started saying it and using it because a friend brought it up in a town in a location near me, and we had a para-unity event, and it was really cool. And a couple of my friends said, "You need to stop saying para-unity. I'll be honest." I was like, "Why?" And they're like, "Well, it's got a bad connotation to it because of what these people did with it in the field before you got in it." And I was like, "Well, let me tell you, I'm just going to take that and I will work and I will make that, even if it's just the little eye of para-unity shine."
Yeah.
I'm like, that'll be my contribution, is I will take some of that off and restore the luster. And so, yeah, I'm like, because it's like, I don't know what else to call it. And
Me too.
I've
Yeah.
been blessed because people will approach me and I'm like, really? You want to, my first thought is always like, why me? Why are you looking to interview me? I'm just a host. And I've only really done maybe 7 states where I've investigated. Just a little over 100 investigations. Not that many, considering,
That's still a pretty good
we've
amount.
been in it for 30 years. And so I'm like, really? You're coming to talk to me? Okay, cool. Let's go for it. I'm like, all right. And it just amazes me. And one of the ladies that interviewed me, it like threw me for a loop because she goes, "So our interviews will be at 6 o'clock, or I think it was 7 o'clock my time, which will be 8:30 my time." And I'm like, "I'm no expert, but the time zones are hourly. So where is this 30 minutes?" And she goes,
Newfoundland.
"Yep."
Yeah.
And so I was sitting there like for the longest time going, "What is this half hour bit?" But yeah, Newfoundland is an hour and a half time difference. And I'm like, that is just goes to prove my point that time does not exist. It's man made because nature would not go, "Okay, we're going to do hour. We're going to screw with people and go an hour and a half here, another hour here, hour."
Yeah. Yeah, being a Canadian, growing up and learning about the Canadian time zones, and it's like, why is, because I grew up on the East Coast in New Brunswick, so they were half an hour ahead of us, and I'm like, why is it half an hour, but everybody else is an hour? Like, they just got to be different, don't they?
And it's like, it doesn't make sense because if you go, "So we're meeting at 1 o'clock," what do you say to them? "We're meeting at 1:30 because of the half hour." And it's like, that just doesn't, it's like, wait, how do you adjust for that or make arrangements to meet? Because it's like that half hour is just so confusing.
Yep. That's why I always, like in the beginning of my podcast, when I first started, I didn't really confirm time zone times. So now I say, how about 3 o'clock Eastern? Not sure where you are, and then go from there, just to confirm that everybody's on the same page, because we've had to reschedule before because we just didn't have the right time zones information. So
Well, yeah, and the one that tickles me is because my show on Tuesday nights is 9 o'clock Central Time. That puts the UK at like 5 a.m. or 3, is it 5 or no, 3 a.m. And I'm like, no way. And, it's like, I would be like, I'm not interviewing anyone from the UK because I'm not making them get up that early. Unless they're up already for some other reason, then I'll have them on. Well, then a guest of mine that was in the UK says to me, don't you pre-record? And I'm like, what? And she goes, you can pre-record it. I was like, what pre-record? And they're like, you do a live show, but it airs later. StreamYard has that built in. I'm like, really? So we did the episode, and then I looked at StreamYard, and sure enough, it says pre-recorded. Upload your video. Okay, what time do you want this to go? Okay, what's this about? Fill it in just like any other episode. They're like, all right, so when do you want us to announce this is going to be for the week? And boom. And I froze out again.
Yeah. Just for a second. It's like, oh. You're just talking.
Yeah, but now that I learned how to pre-record, I'm like, the whole world is my oyster. And I've had guests from Australia on my show.
Oh, wow.
And I actually went on a show in Japan.
That's so cool.
And the funny thing about that one is, so Japan is 14 hours ahead of me. So I'm like, I would always say, okay, so what time in my time? I'd always say, what's my time to be there?
Yeah.
And they're like, you're in Central's time, right? Yeah. So this time. I was like, great, we can do that. I'll be there. And yeah, and that show was a trip because I had set aside an hour for it. And they said, oh, we don't really set a time on our shows. They usually tend to run 2, 3, 4 hours long.
Oh, wow.
Like, I don't do over 2 hours. I'll tell you now. And I think we ended up doing 2.5. But it's like, it's funny. And I think you noticed this as a podcast host, is the first half hour of the show seems to take forever. And then the second half hour is like a blink and it's over.
Yeah, it's funny. Now, I've only had guests and been on shows from Canada, US, and the UK. I'm still looking for guests from other countries, but I just can't seem to find them. So if anyone's listening to this, I'm open to being on other people's shows from other countries as well as having guests. But yeah, my buddy Tommy Cullum over in the UK from Let's Get Freaky podcast, he says he runs on Eastern Standard Time or Central Time. So he's like, I'm running on North American time. So it's easier to record something with him.
Right, and I think, didn't Tommy recently team up with Andy Codes?
I'm not sure.
And Nicole, I think there was a Tommy that was doing shows with him in the UK. But yeah, I've been on a couple of times guest hosting UK show and doing interviews all over the place. And yeah, it is funny when, like you're saying, even I have to now say, my show goes at this time. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, well, what is that in this time zone? And I'm like, okay, I can work with that. As long as it's a North American time zone, I'm pretty good at it. But
yeah. I just Google it.
Yeah. I haven't dealt with Hawaiian time yet.
Neither have I.
I think they're 6 hours behind, or 4 to 6 hours behind.
Would have been funny if they were 30 minutes, like 6 hours and a half, Yeah. That's 2 islands.
But the fun thing is talking with Australia and New Zealand, when I talk with them, is I'll always laughingly say they are in the next they're in the next day morning. It's like 10 a.m. the next day for them. So I would laughingly say, so what's the future look like?
Yep.
Since you're in the future, what does that look? What's it looking like for us? And they would laugh, and they'd be like, when I get guests in the chat room that are I know from either the networks that I'm on or from shows that are on the network, like another show host, or from like my friend in Japan. Yeah, so I point out guests that are in different countries or on the network or different show hosts that pop in.
Yep.
I'll point them out, and like my friend in Japan, I'll be like, oh, Japan's listening, appreciate it. And the guests will be like, really? They're from Japan? I'm like, yeah. They're like, wow. I'm like, yeah.
I love looking at my analytics to see, because to me, it's not all about the numbers. It's where people are listening from. And, I have listeners in Japan and Madrid. I even had the something United Emirates.
United Arab?
Yeah. And Australia as well. And it's so neat to see where people are listening to my little show, It's just like, thank you guys. This is amazing.
So I actually was flattered as I got a comment on one of my YouTube channels on an episode, and they introduced themselves and said, "Hey, I'm from Croatia." So
oh, that's cool.
letting you know, I'm your fan, and I'm like, cool. And every once in a while, I'll see them comment on the show like, "Hey, another great episode." I'm like, "Thanks, really appreciate it." And I had one person comment. He goes, "Hey, message me. I'm really a huge fan, and I haven't I want to ask you something." And so I was like, "Okay, I always say, ask me." So okay. And he goes, "Can I air your episodes on my channel?" And I was like, "Well, you're in another country, so okay." These are copyrighted, my info. So I was like, do I or don't I? I'm like, well, it is exposure. And he's got less than 100 followers, subscribers. So not really feeling like, he's going to do me wrong. And I have friends, airing on there. So I said, well, I'll be honest with you. If you don't edit it, if you leave it as is, you credit my show, tag my channel to it, I have no problem with it. Yeah. And he said, done. And I was like, cool.
And at least he asked permission too. That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the other thing that I was like made me lean towards saying, okay, was, he asked. He didn't just go and do it. So I was like, cool. And so a little secret too is all of my episodes have a watermark on them. So if somebody goes, the theory of what YouTube tells me is, so I've never watched to see if it's actually on there, but there's supposed to be a watermark that if I see, my episode somewhere else, I can say, hey, that's mine.
Yeah.
That's got my watermark on it.
Nice. I never thought of doing that.
Yeah, it's in the, when you build the channel and you do like your banner, your profile image, there's a little thing in the beginning, only at the end, or you can have it all the way through.
Oh, I'm going to have to look at that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, I think because of the issues we've been having, we're going to call it here, but I would like to invite you on again, and at some point we can talk more about some paranormal stuff. But yeah, and hopefully we won't have anybody or anything stopping the recording issues. And here you are frozen again. Oh, Lordy. Oh, this is so frustrating.
Well, this might be on me because I just looked outside and it's downpouring.
Oh, okay. Quickly, can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
So I can be found, my shows are on YouTube under the name of the show, being Paranormal Versus, Riding Through the Unknown, and the energy that surrounds us. And my YouTube channel is...
I got my YouTube channel is... Come on, guys, stop this. This is ridiculous.
And I believe my YouTube channel is either Michael Koff or Michael Koff's Adventures. I'm on Rumble, and on Rumble you can find Paranormal Versus, Tetsu, Riding Through the Unknown, and it's Michael Koff's Adventures. And we air on X. I don't know how to share that out really because I don't ever know how that works. I just know we air live there.
Oh.
And eTalk.tv is an online network where we air our shows live, and we're also on a web-based radio.
Nice.
And there's a lot of great shows on there, so if you click on the radio, they give a little thing on the side of when certain shows will be airing or what's coming up next. And so there's a lot of cool shows on there, and I'm blessed to have our shows on there. And so on eTalk.tv, it's the energy that surrounds us. Tetsu will be Riding Through the Unknown, and Paranormal Versus.
Okay. And the listeners already know that I'll be adding the links in the show notes. So thank you so much for being patient with all the technical issues, Michael. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me on, and I look forward to coming back on.
I do too. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.
Paranormal Heart Podcast.